Hi everyone, thank you for tuning in to today's video. My name is Mike Ritchie with the Center for Personal Protection and Safety, and we have a great one for you today. We're actually going to be answering one of your most frequently asked questions, and that is, why should my organization retain outside experts in the field of behavioral threat assessment and management? And in short, the TLDR is because it's best practice. But what we're going to spend the next few minutes discussing is breaking out some of the most common reasons and justifications for having access to outside experts. So one of them you might think is silly, but it's actually something we see all the time and we want to address. But we'll leave that for last. So the first two are more serious, and it's some that you might have predicted, but definitely worth talking about. First being that because prevailing standards say that you should have access to outside experts. It's a best practice, right? Here's what the prevailing standards say. We'll dig into that. And then the second piece is kind of a flow from that, or a next step, a natural add-on or progression of what that means is that you could potentially reduce your liability exposure as an organization by retaining outside experts. So let's talk about standards first. Let's talk about prevailing standards. From a best practices standpoint and a prevailing standards standpoint, there might be different standards depending on what industry you're in. Healthcare is a great example of this, where there are some specifics from OSHA, the Joint Commission, DNV, specifically for organizations in healthcare. There's even some state regulations and state-level guidelines that you'll want to follow and look into. But regardless of what industry you're in, one of the best and most detailed documents that's been produced is by ASIS International. It's their standard on workplace violence prevention and intervention titled WVPI AA-2020. Now, this standard has actually gone through the American National Standards Institute and has become an ANSI standard. So to make things a little less tongue-tie-y through the rest of the video, we're going to call it the ANSI standard. But the ANSI standard actually calls out the use of outside experts to assist your BTAM team in multiple places, both for training purposes to help train the team up and raise them up, but also for consulting purposes and walking through the threat assessment and management process. Quote, "A qualified threat assessment professional can enhance the quality of incident management." It also says, quote, "A threat management team should be accompanied by the identification of qualified external resources that the team can call upon as needed." Okay, why does this matter? What's it actually mean, right? Benchmarking to these prevailing standards, it does a couple things for us. One, it tells us there's been research, there's been a consensus amongst industry professionals. These are the best practices that we need to align to. Here, going back to that best practices thing again. But more than just providing a best practice for what's good for our people, how do we keep folks safe? As industry professionals, obviously, we're passionate about that, and that's why we do what we do. But there's the flip side of it, which we need to be more and more conscious of, and that is that it can help insulate the organization from potential legal repercussions. And that brings us into point number 2. Point number 2 being the potential reduction in liability exposure. And the ANSI standard actually talks about this. It actually calls this out as one of the benefits that organizations will see when they use outside experts to assist with their behavioral threat assessment and management. It says, utilizing outside experts to assist, quote, "can help mitigate the organization's liability by ensuring the organization has allowed a qualified person to assess violence risk," end quote. And this is the big one. The liability factor in this is the thing that we've been focusing on. If you've been around any of our LinkedIn posts, our videos before, if you've sat in on any of our webinars, it's been our push to help organizations build these programs in a way that are consistent with these standards, because one of the benefits of doing that is helping from a liability perspective and reducing your exposure. Our whole, over the last 5 years, this is what CPPS has been focused on. This is why we introduced our Safe Workplace Certification package. Okay, this is we want to help organizations get to this place. For a long time, people have understood that, best practices, we align with these standards, they help keep people safe. But what's the benefit to the organization of actually doing that? And after years, and we've been called into these court cases where we've walked through this, and these legal teams are treating these standards, like this ANSI standard, as basically a checklist. And they go through, did you do this? Did you do that? Okay, to what extent was this in place, et cetera, et cetera. They go down the list. And we've recognized that, and for years now, this has been our push. It's why we developed the Safe Workplace Certification, is to help organizations develop programs in a way that not only keeps their people safe, but it helps insulate the organization if there were an event, right? So this standard, this ANSI standard quotes, it says that a qualified person to assess violence risk brings the benefit of lowering liability to the organization, but CPPS takes that up a notch. And if you work with CPPS, and if you're a Safe Workplace Certified organization, for example, then not only do you have the privilege of using CPPS's subject matter experts to be expert witnesses if you experience a violence event and subsequent litigation, but we go even above and beyond that. That part of this Safe Workplace certification process is we have all the documentation, the evidence that you need on paper saying, hey, we're consistent with prevailing standards, right? Here's how we're meeting all of these check marks. And so this is a big piece of why you should be enlisting the help of outside experts. Point number 3 that we'll talk about, and this is the one that you might think is silly, and that is that sometimes folks just have to hear it from someone other than yourself. So I'm sure you've encountered this situation where you've been telling your team, we need to do X, Y, Z, or we have it on the list, we need to accomplish A, B, C, and you're getting resistance to it. Lo and behold, an outside expert comes in and they say the same exact thing, well, you guys should consider doing X, Y, Z, or you should accomplish A, B, C, and the team thinks it's the smartest idea they've ever heard. And for some reason, they just haven't heard you say it the dozen or 24 times that you've said it over the last couple years. So as silly and as simple as it might seem, and if we can get past that, in fact, I just worked with a client earlier this week who was dealing with the same thing. Having someone come in from the outside, even if they say only the same exact thing as you've said, sometimes that's all it takes to help get the buy-in and get things moving forward, to help the team understand, to click that concept that they're struggling with. Sometimes that's all it takes. But the benefit of having an outside expert come in is that oftentimes it isn't just limited to that, to mimicking or mirroring what it is that you've already said. Oftentimes the outside expert will provide a unique or unbiased perspective about your situation, whether it's from a training perspective or a consultative perspective, looking and dealing with the threat. Maybe it's assessing the level of severity. Or perhaps it's, we know we have ourselves a doozy, what the heck are we going to do about it? And we can walk through that too and provide insights that you didn't even know were there. And having an outside perspective really does free up a lot of things that you didn't even expect to happen. So there are benefits from that perspective as well. Thanks for tuning into this episode. We'll see you in the next one.